Hey everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of the Federalist Papers. We are on essay number 17, the same subject continued, which was The Insufficiency of the Confederacy to Preserve the Union, written by Alexander Hamilton. We're on page 77. Let's pick up where we left off. An objection of a nature different from that which has been stated and answered in my last address may perhaps be likewise urged against the principle of legislation. For the individual citizens of America, it may be said that it would tend to render the government of the Union too powerful, and to enable it to absorb the residuary authorities. Okay, so think of that. Absorbing residuary authorities. Collectivist. Over just too much power. Okay, let's see. Which it might be judged proper to leave with the states for local purposes. So really knowing the nuances of state lines versus federal jurisdiction, where they should apply themselves and where they shouldn't. Allowing the utmost latitude to the love of power which any reasonable man can require. I confess I am at a loss to discover what temptation the persons entrusted with the administration of the general government could ever feel to divest the states of the authorities of that description. So divesting states of their authorities. Well, Now, that brings into mind something like a federal mask mandate, right? Some would argue leave it to the states. Others would say no, the federal needs to do it, right? Same with shutting down the economy. Leave it up to the states or have a federal one, right? It's quite interesting because the rural areas will be affected quite differently than the cities and such, right? The regulation of the mere domestic police of a state appears to me to hold out slender allurements to ambition. Commerce, finance, negotiation, and war seem to comprehend all the objects which have charms for minds governed by that passion. So that's interesting. So police of state, so a police state. So finance, just money in general. If they are susceptible to the want of power, they might be charmed to do so. Okay. And all the powers necessary to those objects ought in the first instance be lodged into the national depository. The administration of private justice between the citizens of the same state, the supervision of agriculture, and of other concerns of a similar nature, all those things, in short, which are proper to be provided for by local legislation, can never be desirable cares of a general jurisdiction. Well, that's interesting. Well, because it's local, so he laid it out for us earlier on why that would be the case. It is therefore improbable that there should exist a disposition in the federal councils to usurp the powers with which they are connected. So federal councils shouldn't be trying to usurp their mutual networks of connection, because the attempt to exercise those powers would be as troublesome as it would be nugatory. I don't know what that means. Let's see. So the attempt to exercise the powers would become troublesome. So even if it's a nugget, maybe, and it could grow and expand, even if it's so niche, because a nugget is a piece of. Okay. So like a piece of that, even if you're just connected in a small piece, that piece could grow and still cause you a problem. Okay. And the possession of them for that reason would contribute nothing to the dignity, to the importance, or to the splendor of the national government. So such nuggets would not really bring a lot of benefit. But let it be admitted for argument's sake that mere wantonness and lust of domination would be sufficient to beget that disposition. So wantonness and lust of domination. Wow, yes. Would be sufficient to beget that disposition. So that's enough cause to cause those material circumstances where such a type of state or mindset would manifest. Still, it may be safely affirmed that the sense of the constituent body of the national representatives, or in other words, the people of the several states, would control the indulgence of so extravagant an appetite. Extravagant appetite, meaning that beast is going to be really hard to satiate that beast, essentially. It will always be far more easy for the state governments to encroach upon the national authorities than for the national government to encroach upon the state authorities. Well, that's not the case anymore, sir. That's quite the reverse today. The proof of this proposition turns upon the greater degree of influence which the state governments, if they administer their affairs with uprightness and prudence, will generally possess over the people. So, you know your state is doing well if it's being upright and prudent in their behavior. The people will be more civil, essentially, will generally possess over the people. So they'll naturally have a sort of shepherding of their people. Almost, it sounds like he's saying. A circumstance which, at the same time, teaches us that there is an inherent and intrinsic weakness in all federal constitutions. Oh, why so? Let's see. And that too much pains cannot be taken in their origination to give them all the force which is compatible with its principles of liberty. Why intrinsic weakness in federal constitutions? The superiority of influence in favor of the particular governments would result partly from the diffusive construction of the national government. Diffusive construction of the national government by particular governments of the state, but chiefly from the nature of the objects to which the attention of the state administrations would be directed. It is known fact in human nature that its affections are commonly weak in proportion to the distance or diffusiveness of the object. Oh, diffusiveness of the object. Upon the same principle that a man is more attached to his family than to his neighborhood. To his neighborhood than to the community at large, the people of each state would be apt to feel a stronger bias towards their local governments than towards the government of the Union, unless the force of that principle should be destroyed by a much better administration of the latter. Okay, so that can grow up to be that, essentially, is what I'm getting from him. Yeah, it is true. Family first, then your family, your church, and it goes up, it expands out. However, now if you notice, the new era of the new communists and socialists want to do they want to expand that and invert it. State is first, state is your nanny, state is your handout machine. State is there for when you fall. There's no more private charities. There is no more personal accountability in the same sense. There will always be some department that you can try to follow and, get some type of milk from. So that's interesting. We have more broken family structures now. I mean, some organizations openly say they're for the destruction of the nuclear family. They put neighborhood against neighborhood, rural against city. I mean, it is quite interesting when you examine it, how these two groups go at it. Because there is a strong bias towards those who are closer to you than those who are farther away from you. This strong propensity of the human heart would find powerful auxiliaries in the objects of state regulation. So strong propensity. The variety of more minute interests, which will necessarily fall under the superintendence of the local administrations, and which will form so many rivulets of influence. Rivulets of influence. Now, this is quite a really cool word to say. Just like, because it sounds almost like flow. Like when you have these little ripples and rivulets, sounds like movement. Like there's all these little streams, right? Running through every part of society. Cannot be particularized without involving a detail too tedious and uninteresting to compensate for the instruction it might afford. That's funny, dude, he said. Okay, so he's like, hey, you can't just go too particular, too niche, too specialized, because you'd have to go into nuance of details that would put you to sleep, and it would just seem so excessive and semantic-wise that it would be boring, and it wouldn't really make up for what you would get from it, right? That's pretty funny. There is one transcendent advantage belonging to the province of the state governments, which alone suffices to place the matter in a clear and satisfactory light. I mean the ordinary administration of criminal and civil justice. Criminal justice and civil justice. Both important things that we have to learn about when it comes to legislation and how we're supposed to organize ourselves. Great reading as always. Diffusive construction of the national government.